Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Cast your mind back, dear listeners, to yesterday's pod, where at the end I said to Kieran, don't stop the recording because we have to do the interview pod. That's now, that's this bit. It's literally 3 seconds later, Kieran, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah, because both you and I have got to have it. One of us will accidentally stop the recording and then go, shit, we haven't got to go through all that. Damn, we're going to be in such trouble. It's an interview, Kieran. It's a very interesting interview, I think, with Andy Payne, who's the chair of the West Ham Independent Supporters Committee. And he wanted to raise, as I say, a number of issues with us that increasingly many fans, particularly of other Premier League clubs, will start to be worried about. And this is what he had to say. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start with the usual sort of opening question. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your history as a West Ham fan.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Kevin and Kieran. Absolute pleasure and honour as a listener to be on this podcast. So somewhat nervous. And that's the state of mind that all West Ham fans are in, which is somewhat nervous when we watch our club. I'm sure it's the same for Crystal Palace fans. Less so Brighton, probably.
Yeah.
My background, first game I went to was 1971. I think it was the opening day of the season with my dad. We played West Brom, and I've always loved West Brom because they had the West bit as well.
Yeah.
And we lost. And I've been going ever since. I had a sort of a break with West Ham when we hired Avram Grant. Because I just thought that was utterly ridiculous and threw my season ticket in. And then with the new stadium move 5 years later, 6 years later, something like that, I came back. And it's been fun ever since, for sure. But, you know, highlights, beating Arsenal in the FA Cup in 1980, we all know about that. And obviously beating Fiorentina in the Conference League final in Prague, which I was very lucky to be at the game. Probably one of the greatest nights of my life.
Now, you're chair of the West Ham Independent Supporters Committee, Andy. Is that just one of many West Ham fan groups, or are you an umbrella organisation for other groups?
Well, this is up until the formation of the Fan Advisory Board, which is currently about to be announced at West Ham. Okay. This was the official construct for fan groups to come together and have what they call structured dialogue with the club. It's the Independent Supporters Committee, the ISC, has been running for 3+ years. And I think its performance has probably been mixed in terms of output and results for fans. But I think West Ham are learning about fan consultation. I think fans are learning about fan consultation. And what we're all hoping for is that consultation, you know, if you look it up in the Oxford Dictionary or other dictionaries are available, is a two-way thing. I think we're all on that journey, as we would say.
On this pod, no other dictionaries are available, Andy. That's the one. That's our go-to, by the way. You don't have to worry about that sort of talk.
Pleased to hear it.
You don't have to worry about being nervous, by the way. Either Kieran and I, we've done about 500 of these, and we're still just as nervous at the start, especially about pressing the wrong. I worry that we're going to delete the internet one day just by pressing the wrong button. Can you? Do you have an idea how many fans you represent and how many members you have?
Yes. So I'm one of the joint secretaries at Hammers United, which is an independent fan group, which is part of the ISC, and hopefully will be part of the Fan Advisory Board, the FAB. Hammers United has over 19,500 members.
Oh wow! Okay.
So we're a big group. The ISC, which consists of 7 fan groups, including Hammers United, probably represents north of 25,000 West Ham fans.
Wow.
So, you know, pretty big.
That's a significant number. I mean, that's getting on for half the fans in the ground.
For sure.
I wasn't planning to talk about the Fan Advisory Board because it hasn't started yet with you, but I'd be interested to get you back in a couple of years' time because the one at Palace has been going for a year now, and looking at the minutes of the meetings, they pretty much consist of the Fan Advisory Board saying, we're not too happy about this, and the response is noted, and that's it. It's just, so I'd be interested to see what your experience is moving on. I hate to use that expression, moving on, but it's all very well having a meeting once every 3 months with the fans to go, yeah, okay, you don't like the sponsor, fine. You don't like the new kit, fine. We ain't doing anything about it, but at least you told us about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The fans are all volunteers. So I know how much time I personally put into the ISC. We've been negotiating the terms of the FAB, the terms of reference, for 12 months.
Wow. Okay.
Right now, in my job, if I took 12 months to negotiate a contract, for a video game, I'd be sacked.
Right.
I'd sack myself because obviously work for myself. So I think we're on that journey, as they always say on things like X Factor. I'm hoping the journey will be fruitful. Otherwise, fan engagement is just going to be a tick box exercise that the Premier League, want in there to make sure that governance is all high and mighty. We can't be sitting around singing Kumbaya. Fans have got genuine concerns.
Yeah.
And we understand the football club is a commercial organisation. What we think as fans is, could we help the club make better decisions for the fan base? And the fan base is growing and it's moulding and it's moving all of the time. And we completely understand that. But can we work with the club to help them make better decisions? Because better decisions are going to benefit the football club and they're going to benefit the revenue model.
You mentioned your job there in passing, Andy. Just so our listeners know, you work in the world of esports, don't you?
I do. I'm chair of the British Esports Federation, which is, I do, full disclosure, on a voluntary basis. I've done that for 7 years. I also have a number of video games companies that I've founded and invested in. And I've worked in games, been lucky enough to work in games all my career since 1985.
Wow, since the proper start days.
Yeah. It's all good.
I keep trying to explain to my son every now and again how it was for people like Kieran and I and you back in the day, but he barely looks up from his Switch and just goes.
Well, the video games certainly taught you patience.
Yeah,
those of us around at the time would know how frustrating it was to run your 8-bit Spectrum or Commodore game from a cassette tape, something that now is probably not even understood by the youth. But certainly got patience, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but patience is required with fan engagement. Patience is required with West Ham United because they certainly try our patience. That's for sure.
That's true. Also, I was just thinking, in those days, there was only so many things you could do those days with a hedgehog rolling down a roller coaster. We're here to talk about trying your patience. We wanted to talk to you, Andy, about a range of financial issues affecting West Ham fans, many of which will sound familiar to other fans. But before we do that, can we just talk in general a little bit about the new stadium? So we've talked at length on the pod about the impact on the London taxpayer of the stadium. So let's not cover that ground. But I'm just interested in what you feel in general, if the fans are happy with the move, if you think that the reasons that you were given for the move have been fulfilled away from Upton Park or the Boleyn Ground or whatever the bloody hell you people used to call it on a whim. You've had great success since you moved there, but has the club fulfilled its promises on why they wanted to move in the first place?
I think history, time is a healer, isn't it? I think a lot of fans, myself included, felt very, very sad, bordering on angry when we left Upton Park, as we always used to call it. Yes, it was the Boleyn Ground, but most people at West Ham and fans for visiting teams would always call it Upton Park. That's the station you got off at. So we were sad / angry, wistful. I think everyone would agree that the London Stadium, the Olympic Stadium, the Bowl, whatever, we haven't even got a name for it. I think it's certainly suboptimal in some ways as a fan experience. Away fans, who obviously being a football fan, I've got mates everywhere. Away fans always tell me how terrible the away experience is. Well, the home experience hasn't been much better, to be honest. But I think over time you kind of get used to it, don't you? You know, it's like when you moved as a kid from the house that you were brought up in, and it was all great Christmases, and you had toys, and you know your dad used to play the piano and sing West Ham songs. And in the case of our house, because we were lucky enough to move from Leighton to Chigwell when the old man made a few quid, guess who our next door neighbour was?
Trevor Brooking.
Bobby Moore.
No.
Yes.
Wow.
And famously won, my granddad, big West Ham fan, famously won Boxing Day morning, Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, Martin Peters, and their wives round our house with my old man playing on the piano. That was brilliant. Now, you move, my dad then says, oh, lads, we're moving off to Hertfordshire. And we're all like, oh, well, really? And then we go to another house, which was old, big, drafty, and a suboptimal living experience, no central heating or anything. And we all looked back on that house in Chigwell and thought, oh, we had their best times there.
Yeah.
Over time, you get used to it. I think West Ham fans have got used to the London Stadium. I think that new fans have come, and that's welcome. You know, increasing the fan base has got to be what football clubs do. And giving more people the choice to come is a good thing. We've gone from 36,000 at Upton Park, give or take, to now 62,000, give or take. And also, you know, Karen Brady and David Sullivan, you know, talked about affordable family football, and they put affordable family football in place when we moved because they needed, from a commercial and I think from a sort of holistic perspective, to get an extra 20,000 people in that ground. There was a lot of growing pains, you know, problematic when you've got fans of different, if you like, different levels of fandom or whatever that American word means. But yeah, people moving there, perhaps unhappy that they weren't standing with their mates or sitting with their mates anymore, all that kind of stuff. But over time, we're getting used to it. Success, we've had 3 years of European football, streaky, but we had the best European, best record of any club in Europe, other than, I think Man City just took it over last season. And we won a trophy. So that's success, that's real. And there were some really good nights, Lyon and Seville at the London Stadium. Great nights, which will live in the memory for a long time. So I think, you know, on the playing front, we're on a modestly upward trajectory. There's no doubt about it. And we've had a very good transfer window. We'll see, you know, how good it is when the players that most fans believe are pretty good, me included, you know, get to play a bit. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's the story.
That's got to be the ultimate Cockney dream, wouldn't it? Bobby Moore, Billy Bonds around the old piano on a Boxing Day morning, bashing out songs while little 3-year-old Frank Lampard Jr. did a complicated crossword in the background. Well, that's fantastic. Let's have a look at some of the issues, Andy, because as I said before, they're becoming increasingly familiar for fans of other clubs as well. Firstly, concessions. I know this has been a big deal for you. Last year, West Ham came for the OAPs, and this year the club have gone for, well, nearly everybody else. Basically, talk us through your main concerns about the concession, starting with the OAPs last year.
Yeah, so part of the IFC, we had a meeting with the club. We were told, not consulted. We were told that within 24 hours, the over 65 qualification, age qualification, would be moved to over 66. So to put that in perspective, season ticket holders who are you know, becoming 65 within the qualifying time would have expected a 50% price reduction on their season ticket, which represents quite a lot of money. And that was stopped and moved. You had to be over 66. There was no notice on that. And we, you know, the ISC sort of, as chair, I went back and said, this is just not acceptable. We went into you've got to be careful about confidentiality, but it turns out that the number of fans affected by that were probably less than 2 coach loads going to an away ground game.
Okay.
Right? Now, so you would have thought, wouldn't you, that West Ham would have thought, do you know what? Actually, let's think about this. We'll give them a year's notice. and we'll move it next year. And most, if not all fans would have gone, fair enough, thanks very much for letting us know. I can plan.
Sorry, Andy, can I just interrupt there? Were they planning to remove the discount completely?
No.
Or reduce it?
No. Sorry, the discount would be removed for 65-year-olds. It just wouldn't exist.
Oh, okay,
and you only qualify for 66. So if you're a 65-year-old supporter expecting at the beginning of last season to pay your season ticket less 50% concession,
got you.
Okay, So that's what happened. Now, following all that up, there was petitions. A group called Old School Hammers raised the petition. Club took absolutely no notice, frankly. But following all that up, one of the things that we took to the club was to say, look, we need guarantees this is not going to happen again on the concessions. And the club basically said, well, we can't possibly guarantee that because, things change, which appears to be a reasonable position until you come round to exactly 1 year later, March of this year, again, the concessions begin to be changed. And effectively what it said was, if Kevin wants to take his son or grandson to football, and Kevin's got a season ticket and he's in a particular price band, and he wants to buy a concession for his son who's under 18, or indeed under 21, or indeed disabled, and wants that concession reticket next to him in that place, unless it's in the two cheapest, worst position price categories, you wouldn't get it. So that's fundamentally changed a lot. That's the kind of legacy for the future planning that seems to be being changed. Now, West Ham weren't clear about this. They were, frankly, obfuscating like crazy. And we sort of discovered it by accident. And this is something, again, that's not only frustrating, but fundamentally wrong. If the club is going to make changes, they should be absolutely clear about those changes. They should write them down. They should put them on their website. And their staff should know what they are. Let's just say that none of that really happened. And so we're on this voyage of discovery. And I think that what really that indicates is that this is a moving feast and things are being tweaked, season by season. And it's almost like a sort of, let's see what the market says. Let's see how, sort of how it gets received. So that's what happened. I mean, they also included disabled fans in this, which was utterly ridiculous because bands 5 and 6, the cheapest bands available at West Ham, are literally up high at the London Stadium. And you're kind of thinking, well, I wonder who thought that would be a good idea, placing new disabled season ticket holders in that place. I mean, it beggars belief. So that was what happened. It happened without a bang. It happened with a whimper, frankly, and we were onto it. And we're starting to unpick it all and trying to understand it. And it's confusing, Kevin. And I think that is either deliberate or accidental. That kind of fog of war is everywhere. And fans just don't understand why it matters to them. It matters to their children. It matters to their nans, their granddads, their uncles, their aunts, their cousins. And obviously it matters to disabled. It's just really wrong.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
Well, I would slightly disagree with you there, Andy. The fans understand that. It's you wonder how far the club understands that, because before I bring Kieran in on this one, as you say, this has ramifications not just for old, young, and disabled fans now, but for fans in the future. In that some of these fans in the future won't be there because the match day experience becomes so difficult. But then you wonder sometimes, you look at West Ham and other clubs, you wonder, well, perhaps that's what they want because they can make much more money out of their daily tourist or the people who come to West Ham once or twice a season than they can out of a 17-year-old or a disabled fan. They're not getting a lot of money back on those. But Kieran, can I just bring you in here? Because when Andy says to us, you're talking about 2 coachloads of fans that are affected by this age concession. So maybe, let's say 100 West Ham fans, which is probably, off the top of my head, 30 grand, 40 grand. Why would a club be willing to suffer such bad PR for the sake of 40 grand a season? That's where fans get confused because it makes no sense, and that's where fans get paranoid that they are coming for us. That the club don't understand what the fan experience is. And West Ham, we were at Upton Park. It used to be amazing. I preferred going to Upton Park as a broadcaster than an away fan, I had to say. But it was still one of the most. It was a brilliant place to go as a football fan. And I don't think the people who run the club fully understand the fan experience. Why would they try and make that 30 grand, 40 grand? They don't need to make that saving, Kieran.
Well, West Ham United are £250 million a year business.
Wow.
So to nickel and dime people who have been supporting the club through good and bad times, and that's what we all do as fans, is indefensible from a moral or ethical point of view. But I think that the direction of travel, and Andy made reference to this, is one way. What clubs are concerned about is that there's no opportunity to increase the money coming from the TV deals. Sky have effectively signed up for the rest of the decade, and it's flatlining. It's difficult. West Ham have done well in improving their commercial revenues, but again, that's got a natural ceiling. If you can sell out 62,000 tickets at current prices, then, as Andy say, what you do is you keep pushing. You nudge this concession. You target this group of fans. Well, they've moaned, but they've paid up, so therefore we can do it again. And what you do is you get mission creep as far as the clubs are concerned. And this is not just West Ham, because we've raised issues in relation to other clubs in both London and Manchester and elsewhere. I'm not saying that the Premier League's become too popular for its own good, but because it's become so popular, it's allowed the clubs to focus purely on the football as a money-making industry, as opposed to the broader issues which attracted us to football in the first place, as being part of a community, as having an identity. Unfortunately, old school fans have outlived their usefulness. Thanks very much for helping to build the Premier League as a product. Stay in your lane and either accept our terms or move on, because there's somebody there to take your place who's willing to pay more, and that's the problem.
And Andy, was there a formal response then to these attempts to remove the concessions from fan groups? Did you organise around a campaign then? Did you to protest?
Yes, we did. So when I say we, the beauty of this was that a whole bunch of different West Ham fans and fan groups started to, it's kind of grassroots really, started to well up, and activity began. It started really with, we had a campaign run by a guy called Chris Mills, who's very active, called Boycott the Betway. The Betway Cup is a one-off match against foreign opposition, as kind of week before the season starts. We've played Juventus in the past. Most of the time, the tickets are very well priced. It is encouraging, fans to come, families, and so on. And what we didn't want to do was make fellow fans feel bad about that. We just said, look, boycott the game, give the money to the food banks. That Irons for Food Banks, which is the West Ham organised food bank. So we did that, and I mean, the club didn't put the the attendance out, probably for obvious reasons, but independent sources suggest that it was less than 15,000 there.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which was significant. And I think, players were scratching their heads to say, well, what's going on here? In fact, ex-players, David Cross, Julian Dix, Frank McAvenny, Tony Cottee, have all got behind our campaign, the West Ham campaign. Then there was Save Our Concessions, Alex Kirby, a young father who is now faced with being unable to afford to bring his young son, and that started booming. And then the petition was set up, which has currently got 19,276 signatures and counting. That will go over 20,000 without a problem. We'll probably get to 25,000. I think the club are aware of what's happening. Well, we've also now seeing these black balloons, black bubbles, we're calling them.
Yeah.
With Save Our Concessions, Stop Exploiting Loyalty. Stop Exploiting Loyalty is the official hashtag of the Football Supporters Association, who are right behind what we're doing, and other club fan groups for other clubs right behind what we're doing. It's good to see the Football Supporters Association supporting fans. That's a kind of the name's in the title, but they've done a brilliant job. So the black bubbles are going off. We had them at the home game at Aston Villa. They were at Crystal Palace, your ground, Kevin, and for the away fans. And of course, at Manchester City on Saturday, Man City fans joined in as well. It's hard to get that to be really, really impactful, because that the stadium's such a sort of open vacuum. But it's happening, and this whole protest will happen and continue throughout the season. Now, the point is, on Saturday, stewards were taking flat, unpuffed up balloons off people, which is quite frankly ridiculous. But it shows the message is definitely getting through. That's for sure.
Every time I see Roy Keane on TV and people refer to him as a hard man, I just think, you never met Julian Dix. I actually met Julian Dix twice. I was he held his hand out for me to shake it. Oh, I'm not sure I want to do this, to be perfectly honest. It's interesting you mentioned, I want to come on to your lines of communication with the club, but it's interesting you mentioned that, as I read, that City fans in particular were keen to talk with you about the Black Balloon players. Have you found them? Because we know from comments we get from fans of other clubs, we know this is an issue affecting fans, not just in the Premier League, but all over the place. So have you found it easy to consult with other fans on this? Are you kicking at an open door when it comes to cooperation from other fans?
Yes. The fan advisory boards, the chairs of the fan advisory boards have set themselves up a WhatsApp group. Very handy. And so, although West Ham's fan advisory board hasn't been actually announced yet, because I was the chair of the ISC, by default, am on that group.
Yeah.
So we've had good discussions independently, but also via the FSA, and we went to the FSA AGM with Wolves, who've got huge challenges, Chelsea, Spurs, Nottingham Forest, Liverpool, Everton, Manchester City, to name a few. Palace fans, they didn't have. I think they were the only club who didn't have an increase in ticket prices. Fulham fans, very good connections with them. They've been treated abysmally. I mean, unbelievable, frankly. And there are fans within the Premier League, fan groups within the Premier League that are happy with their clubs. Kieran will be pleased to know that Brighton, the fans are very happy with the way the club's run and the engagement and the general sense of, kind of community. And Brentford also. And I don't think it's surprising to see those clubs doing it slightly differently, because, those clubs work at it, and they've probably come from a tougher place in recent times, Brighton having no home for a while and all that kind of stuff. So those fans and the club have got much more of a connection, I think. And I think the owners, Tony Bloom is probably the most intelligent person in football by the sound of it. I know what he does in racing. Is obviously it's a Brighton family, so kind of understood really. Whereas David Gold at West Ham, God rest his soul, was a West Ham person. He's no longer on the scene. It's Karen Brady and David Sullivan, and they're business people, and that's fair enough. So I think we are seeing across club activity now, dialogue, and that's really encouraging. We've got West Ham have been lucky enough to draw the next round of the Carabao Cup. We're away, ho to Liverpool at Anfield in the Cup. What could possibly go wrong? But we're hoping that we can do something with our friends at Spirit Shankly to do a gentle nudge to say, look, we're all in this together. And we know that whilst it's slightly potentially a different story in the Championship, they are queuing for the gallows, because if any of them get promoted, they'll be in the same boat as the rest of us. And I see, the whole kind of monetization of football, whether it's a fad or not, I don't know, but it's contagion there for sure.
Yeah. Palace fans are getting, we're well organised as it is, but we're getting prepared at the moment because the hints coming out from the club are that while this glorious tower of the new stand rises like the Tower of Sauron across Middle Earth in the next 5 years, the rest of us are going to have to suffer a massive increase in season ticket prices to cover.
That's coming, is it?
That's coming. That's words. It's not been confirmed, but there's certainly the rumours. But to be fair to the club, they have kept a lid on season ticket prices in the past 3 seasons, although, of course, all football fans being conspiracy theorists, and of course they have, because they're preparing this for. But anyway, you mentioned, Andy, that the response of the club seems to be cagey, to say the very least. Do you have a direct channel of communication with them? Are they happy to talk to you about other issues, or is this?
Yes.
Are they kind of they have okay?
Yeah, and I mean, we've worked hard. Hammers United were always seen by the club as a protest group. Started by Paul Colborne, aka Bubbles, who's got a lifetime ban unjustifiably from the club because he was the person who ran on the pitch at the Burnley game, uprooted the corner flag and put it in the centre. Did nothing more than that to highlight the mess that West Ham were in at that time. And I think the club have always been slightly sceptical of Hammers United. I've worked hard to put, to make sure that we've got the right credibility on the business level from a professional perspective. I've worked hard to work with the rest of the ISC as a collective, and I think we've made huge strides in the right direction. And I'm hoping that if we're on the FAB, that we can continue the progress. There is a danger that, as you said at the head of all of this, that it becomes a talking shop. And you go around, let's discuss the last minutes. Let's go through the agenda. Let's do the next minutes, if we can ever agree them, by the way. And then they will come back in 3 months' time and put the needle on the beginning of the 45, and here we go again.
Yeah.
And I think we have to avoid that. It's got to be meaningful.
I have to say, much as I admire that sort of peaceful protest with the corner flag in the middle of the pitch, I don't think there are many clubs who wouldn't ban that supporter for life, to be perfectly honest. I know as well, other than the concessions, you have long-term concerns with the rise in ticket prices at West Ham compared to the rates of inflation. Yeah,
I mean, last season's prices were, admittedly, inflation was around 8 to 10%, whichever time you tended to look at it. And bearing in mind that you're forward buying as a season ticket holder, you could say, well, maybe that needs to be viewed over a period. But last season, the prices went up around about 10%. In some cases, a lot more, but around about 10%. And that was equated with, well, inflation. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. We were unhappy about that. But I suppose you kind of realistically think, okay, this season, inflation, when we discussed all this, was sort of 2.5%. And the price rises, a minimum of 8%. And in some cases, 27% on match day tickets, much, much higher. So 1 minute we're having an inflation justification argument, and the next minute it's not inflation. That seems to have gone away as a factor. That's tedious. That's really tedious. Again, if West Ham are trying to make a revenue number, they should talk to us about that. They should open up about it, and we can see how we could do it. For example, with concessions, if they've got such a bee in their bonnet, why don't we talk about loyalty? Why don't we talk about, well, if you're a season ticket holder, each year that you're a season ticket holder, you pay up front, you're coming, each year, you earn a loyalty discount, whatever it may be. But there's no systems in place for any of that stuff. It seems to be, it just seems to be a lot more random. And I think strategically, I run businesses. We're looking short term, medium term, 5-10 years out. Because if we don't, then we're not running our business properly. And and I think that the club sort of needs to understand that the fans aren't, stereotypically idiots. And a lot of us are, reasonably intelligent people who have got other lives and we've got perspectives, and we can help the club with achieving their goals. Because, as I say to the club, you've got 58,000 West Ham fans usually at a game, 4,000 plus away fans. If they're all screaming and shouting for West Ham and they've fallen in love with the club, they will buy your burgers, they'll buy your beer, they'll buy your Coke, they'll buy your merch. They'll do all that, and they'll do it gratefully, and they'll do it through the love. But if you start to be seen to be, rightly or wrongly, exploiting your fan base, then the opposite starts to happen. And that's not cool. That's not cool at all. And I think on that, just one other thing about the diversity of fan groups. I listen to my colleagues at Pride of Irons. I listen to my colleagues at Inclusive Irons. They're almost in tears saying, one of the guys, I won't name names, he said, look, being an Indian at Upton Park, I couldn't go to West Ham. The times have changed. I'm now taking my boy, and he loves it. And my wife wants to come, and my little boy wants to come, and we can't afford it because they've changed the rules. My friends at Pride, colleagues at Pride, they said it wasn't a safe space, football, right? It is becoming safer. Just as it becomes safer, you put all the prices up. This is the sort of thing where, we're not stereotypical. We're real people, and we want to be part of something that we've always been part of. We want to welcome new people to be part of it as well. And that working class family club that Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, and Martin Peters paid for, that's the thing, that we're West Ham fans. We don't mind not winning tons and tons of trophies, because get used to it, Palace, Brighton, we're all the same. But we care about our football club.
That loyalty points thing is interesting as well, Andy, because it tends to be away fans that benefit from loyalty points, which are 3,000 out of 58,000 people. And you kind of think there must be a way of rewarding those loyal home fans who can't go to away games for whatever reason. I've got a couple more questions with you, Andy, to finish, but I'd like to bring Kieran in here on this issue of inflation. Kieran, is it standard practice for clubs to take into account other economic variables when they're setting season ticket prices? Would they look at inflation? Would they look at a new stand being built, so we might have to overcompensate with the other, or do they just base it on put it up 5% from the season before as a standard practice?
There's no one hard fast rule. If we take a look at the rise in broadcasting income over the period, say 2007 to 2017, it was spectacular. So because football clubs were benefiting so much from the increase in broadcast income, and that was a period of time when inflation was running at 1% to 2% a year, it just seemed churlish to increase season ticket prices. Because inflation has risen, what clubs have been doing, they've been waiting for somebody to break ranks. And for all of the for all of the criticisms that are levelled at the Glazer family at Manchester United, they kept Manchester United season ticket prices frozen for around about 10 years. They didn't have to, but they found it difficult, because especially if Liverpool and West Ham and Arsenal and all of these other clubs are keeping their prices static, it becomes more difficult. So I think there is sort of a collective discussion made at board level. And again, Andy was talking about WhatsApp groups in respect of fan groups. I can assure you there are WhatsApp groups between football chief executives at Premier League level.
Okay.
And they will sort of have that, if we were to put up prices by 5%, how is anybody else thinking of putting them up? And it's very difficult to say that one particular group of fans is being targeted if 19 clubs out of 20 increase prices. So it is an issue, and costs have risen for football clubs. And he knows, from say he's a businessman himself. If your costs rise, you either have to go and accept you're going to have lower profits, or you need to pass on those cost rises to your consumer base. But given the relative wealth that comes from the broadcast deal, targeting fans, especially given that it is fan loyalty upon which the Premier League has been built, does seem very harsh. But we have moved to a new ownership mentality whereby private equity, hedge funds, their focus is on bottom line. And if we can still sell those same number of tickets at higher prices, we will do so. And that's where they're coming from. They're not football fans. And Andy mentioned Brighton and Brentford. I think it's also noticeable both of those clubs are owned by fans of the club, and therefore there's a greater opportunity to have a fan's eye view. But at the same time, Brighton put up their ticket prices for the last 3 seasons, and the fans have accepted it because the club's done well. And that's another thing. If you do feel that there's that bond, as Andy was saying, you'll have a bit of a moan, but you'll still buy the pies. And you'll buy the official shirt as opposed to getting the snide one from those Chinese websites for 12 quid, because you are supporting the club in doing so.
Yeah, well, Brighton ticket prices go up, Kieran. All you have to do is cut back on the ceviche for a week or two, and you can afford that, can't you? If you have to miss out on a trip to Waitrose, that's soon as that. Andy, I've got two questions left for you, and they're both about the future. First of all, I'm interested in your future concerns at West Ham, because we spoke on the pod this week, as everybody has this week, about dynamic pricing and the way people access their tickets, which is not only through the club. So is that something that's on your radar of worries?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's I'll come on to that. I just before I do that, just in terms of the future, I always think it's quite good to look at the past to get some kind of direction of travel and see if you can, Venn diagram it. This is a quote from Karen Brady in April 2015, so just before we moved. We've always said that a move to our magnificent new stadium would be a game changer for West Ham. A chance to increase revenue, invest in the team, and improve our performance on the pitch, but crucially, without putting an extra financial burden on the supporters, who already come to watch every home match. 2 years later, in addition, the club are continuing to offer concessions and junior rates in bands 1, 2 and 3 as part of our ongoing commitment to providing affordable family football, 2017. And just the third quote is from Uli Hoeneß, president of Bayern Munich, talking about season ticket prices a few years ago. He said, I quote, "We could charge more than 104 euros. Let's say we charge 300 euros. We'd get 2 million more euros in income. But what's 2 million to us? In transfer discussions, you agree about that in about 5 minutes."
Yeah.
We don't think that fans are like cows who you milk. Football has got to be for everybody. And that is the biggest difference between us and England. Now, that fills me with passion and dread in equal measure.
Yeah.
Because, I came back from the Euros. I love going to Germany to watch football. I was a tourist. And, the football culture in Germany is now making me feel wistful for what it used to be in Britain. Going on to what you talk about the future, I think the Ticketmaster situation with the Oasis tickets at the weekend, everyone will probably have heard about that in the UK. The demand pricing, I think the mistake that Ticketmaster made there was they weren't clear about it until you got to the front of the queue, like I did.
Right.
And you went from 150 quid ticket for standing at Wembley to 300 and something. But with that particular issue, you can see that Ticketmaster, to quote my friend Tim Ingham at Music Business Worldwide, Ticketmaster could be a very convenient pain sponge for football clubs, okay? Because if anyone believes that Ticketmaster made the decision on pricing and demand pricing, think again. Okay. But here's the but that people haven't figured out yet. Oasis came out with a statement and said anything that's been resold, unless it's through Twickets or Ticketmaster, at the value you paid, that will be cancelled. That ticket will be cancelled. Now, people think that's an idle threat. I don't think so. There's evidence to say people have, not for Oasis, but for other gigs where they bought through resale sites, such as Viagogo, StubHub, and others, that tickets have been cancelled. So it might just be that the double whammy here is that people think Oasis, money grabbing, whatever, possibly. But actually, what will happen is that the scalpers, the touts, might well come a cropper here. What it says for me is that Ticketmaster, a US company, are coming into they've always been in the UK live scenes, certainly in music and in football, but it will be very convenient for football clubs just to hand that over to Ticketmaster, outsource it completely, not have a ticket office, not have to have staff that they can't brief properly or don't understand stuff or are under terrible pressure from customers, and just outsource the whole problem and become the pain sponge for likes of people like us. That I think is we're not sure where it's going to go, but the Premier League, as I think Kieran said, it's victim of its own success in terms of it's a so-called global product. Is that a good or a bad thing? It's a thing. It is what it is. But we as West Ham fans, you as Crystal Palace fans, Kieran as a Brighton fan, and many, many millions don't really want to get left behind by this. Our culture is to go to watch if we buy a season ticket, we expect to go and watch our football team multiple times a season, not just once in the pickup and then splash $1,000 in the merch shop and buy overpriced hot dogs, off the back of the car in the car park. That's not our culture. Okay. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not what we do as football fans.
I have to say, I like the pain sponge reference. I might start referring to myself as Kieran Maguire's pain sponge. I'll change it on my Twitter. That Oasis thing, just by the by, is having a knock-on effect all over the place. It's already affected next year's Edinburgh Fringe, because the first 3 nights of the Fringe, Oasis are playing in Edinburgh, and already there's not a hotel room to be had next year in Edinburgh, and they've been going at 1,500 quid a price. I've got a feeling the answer to this is not going to be optimistic. Andy, my last question: How do you think this situation is going to play out? Not just for Hammers fans, but across the country. Is this? Yeah, we're not chaining ourselves to railings here. We can't resist change. But are there any battles we can win here when it comes to pricing, the way we watch football?
I think we have to go for hearts and minds, really. I mean, it might sound a bit weak and a bit sort of apologist, but we've got to get the owners of the clubs, the management of the club, the commercial management of the club, to understand how important fans are, energised fans behind their team. The players know it. I mean, we were told during COVID, football is nothing without fans. Okay, what's happened to that one then? Was that just a 5-minute throwaway? We know that fans make a difference to the football team. So I would appeal to all club owners. Remember that. Price it sensibly. Make sure you reward loyalty, don't exploit it. Get your fans to fall in love again if they're not already with the club, and be part of that team. Going forward, I mean, as Kieran said, and I think the Ticketmaster situation is very interesting and unfolding, but going forward, They talk about the revenue bottoming, pretty much being topped out now from Sky. Well, I'm not sure Sky are going to be significant in past that contract because, in case people haven't been paying attention, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, the big tech companies who are also all American, will have something to say about this. The metaverse, whether we like that word or not, is coming. We will be able to quite soon watch very compelling virtual, real content, real-time content probably via goggles of some description, glasses hopefully, and that will be an experience that goes around the globe, and people will enjoy it and they'll pay for it. So the revenue opportunities are going to get stratospheric for football clubs, for Premier League football clubs, for sure. What worries me is that if the kind of boat shoe, well-heeled hedge funder is the only person who can afford to actually be in the ground for these legendary moments, we talk about this in esports, legendary moments, you were there, then that is fundamentally going to change the atmosphere within the ground. West Ham's official overseas ticketing partner talks about enjoy the electric atmosphere at the London Stadium, sit next to and be part of the fanatical support. Well, in my experience, I know there's a causation correlation discussion that's been ongoing, but there is a slight correlation between rich people who can afford to pay anything to go to something, being disinterested because they could just do something else. Get a cab there, get a cab home, get a driver, whatever it may be. No disrespects to people with lots of money, please. We're an aspiration nation, aren't we, Keir Starmer? And so what we've got to look forward to, I think, is the club owners. And Kieran makes a point, Brentford and Brighton being owned by fans of those clubs, remembering where we've all come from. That's why history is really important. The new the new regulator, the Football Cup Governance Bill, it talks about the culture. It keeps talking about badges and it talks about Cub strips and stadium. Yeah, that's culture. That's our history. But guess what? People. Where's the reference to people? Where's the reference to the fans who've been on the journey? Not all their lives, but 3-4 generations of fans all around the country. Okay, that needs to be remembered. People are at the heart of this. And if those football players running around don't get properly, G'd on, they will play less well. And that will be detrimental to the results on the pitch, which ultimately will be detrimental to the commercial results. So that's my view on these things.
I've got nothing against rich people, Andy. I know a couple. I work with a couple. But what does annoy me, and it annoys me on behalf of West Ham fans, is that there are several TV production companies. I know one that's got 4 West Ham season tickets. I know one that's got 6 West Ham season tickets because they couldn't get hold of Arsenal season tickets, but they could get hold of West Ham season tickets when they moved to the new stadium, and they use them as a little bonus for any Americans coming over to see some of their acts. Have 2 tickets to go and see a Premier League football game. That's what annoys me, because I can't afford to have 4 season tickets on the off chance that a mate of mine comes over to see a one-off Palace game. And so why should they be able to do it? I mean, they can, and I don't resent the money in general, but I resent the fact they've got 4 West Ham season tickets when none of them support West Ham.
I agree. And I think, look, again, we're talking about commercials here, the clues in the title of your podcast. The thing is, if 10%, 15% of the ground is reserved for corporate, expensive stuff, fine. Just level with the fans, tell them that, okay? Let's work with the clubs to help them realise their vision. But we aren't customers. We're fans. We're supporters. There is a fundamental difference. And I think that the owners, some owners know it, but choose to ignore it. Some owners are completely oblivious to it and just think they talk about franchising and all that kind of stuff. I mean, once Premier League, gets clubs get to 14 votes, they can do what they like. There's no reason why they won't stop relegation and promotion. They just close it off. I mean, that would be the dream for a lot of the owners.
Yeah, let's leave it there because we'll be going into another hour if we keep doing that. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Andy. At heart, you sound like an old romantic in the same way that Kieran and I are, or legacy fans, if you prefer. But it has been a pleasure talking to you, and I really would be interested in talking to you again in a year's time to see how that fan advisory board experience has gone for you. So thank you for joining us, and I'll look forward to seeing you around the old piano.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And yes, we are old romantics because once we were new romantics.
I used to. I had a double-breasted shirt that I was very fond of with a floppy. I looked like Jerry Murphy. That was
I've just got a double breast now rather than a shirt.
Off the back of that interview, Kieran, which was very measured, very interesting. One thing I should have clarified we need to say that the pricing strategy for West Ham at the London Stadium is entirely down to West Ham Football Club, isn't it? The London Stadium itself have got nothing to do with setting ticket prices at West Ham.
That's right. I mean, the E20 LLP or whatever it's called, they are the landlords. West Ham are the tenants, and West Ham are entitled to sell what they want at what price they want for every match that the club plays. So that is the position. I agree with you. I thought Andy's comments were measured; they were proportionate. He was right to identify that when the club went from Upton Park to the new stadium, the ticket prices were fair. Because the club had to attract another 25,000 fans. But what we have seen is a gentle, and more than gentle at times, chipping away of what you might say they're not rights, but I think there's an expectation. If you put in a lifetime into supporting West Ham United, then in your elderly years, perhaps you're entitled to a bit of comeback from the club itself. And what we are seeing is very disappointing.
Well, the trouble is not just elderly fans, is it, as well? That's the other issues here. I sometimes worry, Kieran, whether we've been partly responsible for this as well. There is a paranoia amongst fans now. And as Andy did try and... He said, West Ham are a commercial business. Of course, they've got every right to try and maximise income. But it does play into that paranoia at the moment. We have the level of saving that West Ham are going to make here is negligible. So it does get you wondering whether this is entirely down to, as we mentioned before, just trying to discourage some of the more casual long-term fans. If you just put in enough little obstacles in the way for people to give up their season ticket, which frees up, and we've talked about dynamic pricing, which frees up the club to have another 100, 200 tickets per game that they can sell for a lot more money to people that will spend a lot more money when they're there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The difference between finishing 15th and 14th in the Premier League this season is £3.5 million. West Ham are not going to get an extra £3.5 million from making life more difficult for parent and child to attend matches, because it now becomes more complicated. If you've got kids that want to go with their parents, it's the same for senior citizens. Yeah, he highlighted the issue for disabled fans as well. The negative consequences of these decisions far outweigh, in my opinion, the very, very marginal positive impact that it has on wages, so it has on overall revenues.
And somewhat depressing as well, Kieran. So, Andy works within the games industry and has done for some time and is aware of the technology. I kind of hope that the metaverse had gone away. But it's slightly worrying to hear that from Andy's point of view, it's marching in our direction and it's getting there quicker than maybe some of us older fans had hoped. Yes,
I think it's going to arise in one of two ways. First of all, the headset option. At present, the headsets they're a little bit clunky, but we are at the embryonic part of that development. And secondly, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I've heard this from people in private equity and so on, the desire to build 20 stadiums dotted around the world, so that if Liverpool are playing Manchester United, you can watch this in Mumbai, you can watch this in Melbourne, you can watch this in Beijing, you can watch this in Miami, and so on, in a similar manner to what we have for the ABBA Voyage show, which is a purpose-built stadium in London, built in 2022 technology. Well, the technology in another 10 years, you'll be able to physically go along to a match with your mate, and you will see the match as if it was real, taking place in front of your eyes. A lot of money to be made, and that's why I think so many people are investing in the game, because it might be 5 to 10 years, but it could be absolutely transformational in terms of club revenues.
That's interesting, because somebody sent me a photograph last week of the Man United Fulham game, the first game of the season, Friday night, at a sports bar in San Francisco, with a screen that was, beyond IMAX size, which essentially was watching the game on telly, but almost full size. It looked incredible. It looked horrible from a science fiction point of view, but if they can do that in a sports bar in LA, it's not going to, or San Francisco, it's not going to take them much longer to build that, as you say, stadium in Mumbai and Beijing, where you get the full experience, except you're watching it on TV or you're watching avatars.
Yep, and there's a lot of money to be made on the back of that, because again, if you know anybody that's ever attended that ABBA show, ticket prices are they're very, very high. And what are you seeing? You're seeing 4 avatars, and that's it. And it's the costs of putting on the show are close to zero. I know there's a backing band there each night, but it's a hugely profitable enterprise.
Yeah, or to save yourself a bit of money, you could always just Google Larry Grayson ABBA, and you'll see ABBA on the Larry Grayson show in 1974. Or it's hard to tell which of them is more bemused, ABBA or Larry Grayson. To be perfectly honest, thank you to we had we ended yesterday's pod with Pepe Le Pew, so we've plummeted into the future talking about Larry Grayson and ABBA. Kieran. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you. You get your access to our chat community and a Christmas quiz, which is coming up. I can't wait. You can do all that and much more by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X, and find us on our YouTube channel. And our book is coming out in paperback in a matter of weeks. And if you want to find details about that, go onto our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday for our questions pod. Kieran's already done his customary farewell yesterday, so I'm not going to knacker him by asking for another one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.